What is going on, everybody? I hope you guys are all having a great day. Today, I am going to be giving you guys 10 tips on how you can master your fantasy drafts here in Madden 25. Whether you're playing in a league by yourself or with some friends or in a 32-person competitive league. Today, I'm going to be giving you guys some tips on how you can draft the best possible team for whatever league you are in and maximize your opportunity to win the league. And so yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. Alright, so I'm going to be going round by round with each tip just to make it simple. So we got pick number 23. And so my tip number 1 for fantasy drafts, if you do not get a top pick, which a top pick being like within the top 10, because at pick number 10 you can see that's where the last, like, I believe Dak is an 87 overall if I'm not mistaken. So after Dak, there's pretty much no high rated quarterbacks. So if you do not get a pick inside of the top 10, which if you do, you should 100% take a quarterback. My tip number 1 is, if you are not able to land one of the top quarterbacks in the league, is draft a defensive lineman in round number 1, because it is very important to build up that defensive line. And as you guys can see, we have a ton of options here: Dexter Lawrence, Chris Jones, Quinnen Williams. If we want an edge rusher, we got Josh Allen. We got Aiden Hutchinson here, 94 overall. And then there's also TJ Watt, Max Crosby here as well. So yeah, tip number 1, if you are not able to land one of the top quarterbacks in the league, take a defensive lineman round 1 and start building out that defense. Also, quick side note, Jaden Daniels is available at pick 23, which is pretty surprising. So you could make an audible and just take Jaden Daniels round 1 and then defensive lineman round 2. And that still would work because, you know, in a couple of tips, I do have one relating to quarterbacks. So the tips still work. So if you are able to get one of the top quarterbacks, take a defensive lineman round 2. So yeah, either or works, but yeah, that's tip number 1. And coming in with tip number 2, I have draft 2 young corners and 1 old corner. And what I mean by that is to try and draft 2 corners that are under the age of 25 and then 1 that is older. And the reason being is because there's a lot of corners that are high overall. You know, preferably you get at least 1 corner that is at least an 85 overall. But there's a lot of corners, you know, take Stephon Gilmore for example, who are older but is above an 85 overall. And as a general rule, I would say have at least 1 corner be above an 85 overall and have the other 2 that are going to be starting be at least a 78 overall. And as for the order of which you draft them, you could really go any way. You could go old, young, young, you could go young, old, young, or you could go young, young, old. It's really up to you. But yeah, that is tip number 2, draft 2 young corners and 1 old corner. And then here with tip number 3, this one is a little similar to the last one except a little different. Draft 3 young wide receivers and have at least 1 be an 85 overall or above. And of course, by young, I mean 25 years old or younger. And you have plenty of options for young wide receivers. You know, Chris Olave is 1, T. Higgins is 1, Rashee Rice, Drake London, George Pickens. You know, these guys are under the 85 overall mark, but give it half a season and they will progress to an 85 most definitely. And as a general rule, I would say have all 3 of your wide receivers be at least like a 77. Like there's guys like Alec Pierce, Romeo Dobbs, Michael Wilson, Lad McConkey, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Rome Odunze, who are under that 80 overall mark but are young and will develop very well. And Keon Coleman as well, just saw him. And Xavier Worthy. We can just keep going down the list. But yeah, that's tip number 3, try and draft 3 young wide receivers. And so with tip number 4, this kind of ties into what I was talking about with Jaden Daniels in round 1. Tip number 4 is draft a quarterback within the first 4 rounds. And the reason I say this, and I will show you this after this round, is from when I've been experimenting with doing a few practice drafts. After round 4, the best quarterback on the board is Russell Wilson in terms of like overall, because Derek Carr, Matthew Stafford, and Kirk Cousins will all usually, from what I've seen, get taken in round 4. There will be some young guys like JJ McCarthy, Anthony Richardson, Michael Penix, Bryce Young, who will be available later on in the draft, so you can decide to wait. However, you are going to take a significant drop off in overall. But yeah, I'll show you guys in the next round how the quarterbacks will all go. But yeah, that's tip number 4, draft a quarterback within the first 4 rounds. Let's go on to tip number 5. Okay, so before we go to tip number 5, I'm just going to show you guys the quarterbacks. Yep, Russell Wilson is the highest rated quarterback available currently, which I did take Kirk Cousins in the last round, but if I didn't, he would have gotten taken. So yeah, if you don't take a quarterback within the first 4 rounds, your options will be down to like Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, and Anthony Richardson. I guess JJ McCarthy got taken, but yeah, so that's just a continuation from tip number 4. Let's go to tip 5. And for tip number 5, build up your defensive line early. As you can see, we are still only in round 5, so there is still plenty of defensive line talent left on the board. However, they do start to go by pretty fast. And as a general rule, I would say you want all of your starting defensive linemen to be at least an 80 overall, with the exception of having some rookies or maybe some young players that will develop. So if you have a guy like Trayvon Walker at 78 overall or Dallas Turner at 76 overall, I would say that would be an exception because they will develop moving forward and most likely be above an 80 after like a season or 2. But yeah, that's tip number 5. Build up your defensive line early on in the draft. And before we do tip number 6, I would like to mention that I do have a fantasy draft franchise series that I'm doing where in the draft I actually ended up getting the number 1 pick, which was actually pretty crazy. But if you're interested in checking that out, I have a playlist of all the episodes, which I only have 2 episodes so far, up on my page, so you can feel free to check that out if you are interested. I will be doing more episodes as time goes on. I just started this series like a week or 2 ago, so it's still pretty early on, but you know, as time goes on, I'll be doing more episodes. I also do have a Giants franchise rebuild series that I'm doing. That gameplay is, you know, a little worse because I don't have Patrick Mahomes, but I'm doing that as well. And, you know, since I'm just talking about all my content, I do have a playlist where I do fantasy draft challenges. So if you guys want to check any of those out, playlists are up on my page. So feel free to do that. But yeah, besides that, tip number 6, do not force a running back pick early. As you guys can see, we are in round 10. And there is plenty of good running backs available, like David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, James Cook, Jalen Warren, Jordan Mason, Tyler Algier. Like, that's just to name a few. There is plenty of good running backs available. Jonathan Brooks, he's a rookie, and I'm pretty sure he has star dev as well. Well, he's hidden, but like, it goes to star dev. And by the way, Derrick Henry was available in round 9. I took a wide receiver, so I didn't take him, but yeah, so don't force a running back pick early. There's plenty of good running backs here, and this is round 10. There's going to still be plenty of them in later rounds as well. So, yeah, do not force a running back pick early. That is tip number 6. And then with tip number 7, we have wait on taking a tight end. Because as you can see here in round 11, there is still plenty of good young tight ends here. Jake Ferguson, Dalton Kincaid, who I believe is like 23 or he's 24, close enough. Cade Otton is here too. Taysom Hill is not young, but he's here. Isaiah Likely is here. So don't feel the need to take a tight end early on. I would say focus more on your wide receivers and building out your defensive line as well as your cornerback. So yeah, tip 7, don't take a tight end early on. Wait and take one later on in the draft. Now here we have tip number 8, wait on taking linebackers, because here we are in round 13. Drew Tranquill is available. Bobby Wagner is here. He'll probably go within the next couple of rounds. Blake Cashman is here. So there's 3 linebackers right there that are above an 80 overall. And then there's also guys like Trenton Simpson, who are pretty young, 23 with star dev. He'll develop very well. And then for those of you who like to move safeties to linebacker, there's still plenty of good safeties that you can switch over as well here, available in round 13. So yeah, that's tip number 8. Don't worry about linebackers. You can take them later on in the draft. And for tip number 9, as you guys can see, we are in round 22. My roster is pretty much complete except for like a few positions. Like I do still need a free safety, but other than that, the roster is, well, I do need a fullback. That's right. Can't forget about that. But yeah, my roster is basically complete. So once you get to a point where your roster is pretty much complete and you're just drafting just to draft, tip number 9 is draft the best available players so you can trade them off after the draft. Just draft the best available. Like Brian Robinson, he's like what, 24, 25, star dev. You will have pretty decent trade value. And you can just pretty much go down the line. You could take Marcus May in the next round, James Bradbury, Nelson Aguilar, Alan Lazard, Marcus Epps, and you can just keep drafting best available and then trade them off after the draft or in the off season after your first season and try and get a bunch of draft capital. Whatever works for you, but yeah, that's tip number 9. draft the best available players in the later rounds so you can trade them off. And last but not least, before I show you guys what my roster is looking like after doing my 10 tips and simulating a season to see how well the team does. Tip number 10, if you are in a league that does like age reductions and development traits, this is pretty common in competitive leagues. And if you haven't heard of that before, basically to sum it up, it's basically when you can reduce an age of a player. For example, Tyrod Taylor, if I wanted to use an age reduction on him, he would go down to like 21 years old. And then if I wanted to do a development trait update on him, then I could add him to like Superstar or even X Factor. It's basically just a thing that some online competitive leagues do. But in regards to this, tip number 10, if you are in one of those leagues, wait until the very, very, very last round to take a quarterback. As you can see, I am in round 30 here, which, you're probably not going to go to round 30 in an online draft. You might go to round like 20 or something. So there will be better quarterbacks on the board, but still, as this general rule, wait until the very last round to take a quarterback, and then use your age reduction on him, and then use your dev trait upgrade on him as well. Just speaking from experience, I did this a few Maddens ago with Matt Ryan. I took him in like the last round, upgraded his dev trait to Superstar, and he just went off. It was actually insane. So yeah, if you are in one of those leagues, tip 10 applies to you. And yeah, with that being said, I'll show you guys what the roster is looking like, and then we'll sim a season to see how well it can do. And so just looking at this team after doing my 10 fantasy draft tips, we have an 86 overall team with an 85 offense and an 88 overall defense. So that overall is very solid. And just all across the board, this team is very solid. We got a very solid offensive line, some very, very talented receivers, a very good running back, and an 84 overall quarterback. So yeah, this offense does look pretty good. And one thing I did notice is apparently I forgot to take a second defensive tackle, which I don't know how that happened, because I'm like 99% positive I did take one for some reason, even though like I'm positive I did. I guess, well, I mean, I didn't, but like, obviously I didn't, but like, I just don't know how I messed that up, because I'm like positive I did, but obviously I didn't. I messed it up, but yeah, it is what it is. Overall, this team is very good. This defense, I'm surprised, is only an 88 overall. I feel like it should be a 90, but I don't know. I mean, I guess it is what it is. Overall, though, this team is very good. And just for fun, we will sim through a season to see how well it does. But I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope the tips work for you. So yeah, without further ado, we're going to go ahead and sim the season and see how well this team does. And for simming this, we're going to use the Bengals playbook. I just heard that's a good one to use for sim, just in case anyone was wondering. But yeah, we're going to do that, and then we'll sim the season. And as we sim to the playoffs here, like I mentioned before, I do have a lot of other Madden. I also have 2K content and gaming content in general up on my page, and we go 10-7. Pretty solid. Let's see if we can go on to this Super Bowl here. But yeah, like I was saying, I do have a lot of other content up on my page. If you enjoyed this, feel free to check that out. That would be greatly appreciated, and we do not make the Super Bowl. Very unfortunate. That's absolutely devastating. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching all the way into the end. I really appreciate that. If you enjoyed, feel free to check out my other content. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.